The moment I saw my own DNA profile flash across the computer screen, matching the blood evidence from the Riverside Park murder scene, I felt my entire world collapse around me like a house of cards in a hurricane. My name is Detective Sarah Chen, and after 15 years of putting criminals behind bars, I was now staring at evidence that suggested I was one myself. My hands trembled as I double-checked the results, hoping against hope that there had been some terrible mistake. But there it was, clear as day, a perfect match between the DNA found at the crime scene and my own profile in our law enforcement database. The victim was Rebecca Martinez, a 34-year-old teacher who'd been found stabbed to death 3 days ago behind the playground equipment. I'd been the lead detective on the case, working tirelessly to find her killer. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been hunting myself without even knowing it. I sat in the empty forensics lab at 2:47 a.m., the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, leaving me alone with this impossible revelation. My coffee had gone cold, but I couldn't taste anything anyway. My mouth felt like it was full of cotton, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. How could this be possible? I had no memory of ever meeting Rebecca Martinez, let alone harming her. I'd reviewed the case file dozens of times, every witness statement, every piece of evidence, every timeline. There was nothing that connected me to the victim or the crime scene, except for this damning genetic evidence that I couldn't explain away. The blood had been found on a piece of broken glass near Rebecca's body. Not a lot, just enough for a DNA profile. At first, we'd assumed it belonged to the killer, perhaps cut during the struggle. Standard procedure was to run it through CODIS, the national DNA database, looking for matches with known offenders. When that came up empty, we expanded the search to include law enforcement profiles for elimination purposes. That's when my world came crashing down. I thought back to that Tuesday morning when we'd first arrived at the scene. It was October 15th, unseasonably warm for autumn in Portland. Rebecca had been discovered by an early morning jogger around 6:30 a.m. The call came in just as I was finishing my first cup of coffee at the precinct. Detective Mike Rodriguez, my partner of 8 years, had driven us to Riverside Park. We'd worked together on over 100 cases, and I trusted him more than anyone else on the force. Mike was the steady, methodical type, a perfect complement to my more intuitive approach to investigations. "What do we know so far?" I'd asked as we pulled up to the scene. "Female victim, appears to be in her 30s. Multiple stab wounds. Jogger found her around dawn," Mike had replied, checking his notes. "First responders secured the scene, and CSI is already processing." The crime scene had been brutal but precise. Rebecca was lying face down near the old oak tree, her dark hair fanned out around her head like a halo. She'd been wearing a blue jogging outfit, the kind of athletic wear that suggested she'd been out for an early morning run when she was attacked. Her phone was found nearby, cracked but still functional, showing she'd been listening to a true crime podcast when she died. The irony of that detail had struck me at the time. 3 stab wounds to the back, angled upward toward the heart. The medical examiner later confirmed that the second wound had been fatal, a precise strike that punctured her left ventricle. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. But now, sitting in this sterile lab with the DNA results glowing on the screen before me, I realized I might be looking at evidence of my own crime. The thought made me physically ill. I rushed to the small bathroom adjacent to the lab and barely made it before vomiting up what little I'd eaten that day. Splashing cold water on my face, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My Asian features, inherited from my mother's side, looked drawn and pale under the harsh lighting. My black hair, usually pulled back in a neat ponytail for work, had come loose and hung limply around my shoulders. The woman looking back at me looked like a stranger, someone capable of things I couldn't even imagine. Could I have done this? Could I have somehow blocked out the memory of committing murder? I'd heard of cases where people experienced dissociative episodes, where they did things with no conscious recollection of their actions. But that seemed like something that happened to other people, not to a detective with 15 years of experience and a spotless record. I returned to the computer and began researching every possible explanation for false positive DNA matches. Contamination was the most likely culprit. Perhaps my DNA had somehow gotten mixed in with the evidence during processing. But I'd been meticulous about following protocol. I'd worn gloves and protective gear at every stage of the investigation. I'd never even touched the piece of glass directly. Twin studies showed that even identical twins could have slight variations in their DNA profiles, so that wasn't an explanation either. I didn't have any siblings, let alone a twin. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 22, and I was an only child. Lab error was another possibility, but our forensics department had an impeccable reputation. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who'd processed the DNA evidence, was one of the most respected forensic scientists in the state. She'd been doing this work for over 20 years and had testified as an expert witness in hundreds of cases. As I sat there in the darkness, trying to make sense of the impossible, my mind drifted back to my childhood. I'd been adopted when I was 3 years old by the Chens, a loving couple who couldn't have children of their own. They'd raised me as their own, never making me feel like anything other than their daughter. But they'd always been honest about my adoption, telling me that my birth parents had died in an accident and that I'd been placed in foster care before coming to live with them. What if there was something about my biological family that I didn't know? What if there were relatives out there who shared enough genetic material with me to cause confusion in DNA testing? But even that seemed far-fetched. The match was too perfect, too exact. I decided I needed to retrace every step of the investigation. If I was going to clear my name and my sanity, I had to find another explanation for this evidence. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. Mike sounded concerned when I told him I was coming down with something and needed to take a day off. "You sure you're okay, Sarah? You sounded fine yesterday," he said. "Just feeling under the weather." "I'll be back tomorrow," I lied, hating myself for deceiving my partner. Instead of staying home, I drove to my storage unit across town. I kept old case files there, the ones that had particularly affected me over the years. Cases that had stayed with me long after they were closed. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I needed to see if there was any connection between Rebecca Martinez and my past that I'd somehow missed. 3 hours later, I was surrounded by banker's boxes and manila folders, my clothes dusty and my eyes strained from reading in the dim light. Nothing. No connection to Rebecca Martinez in any of my previous cases. No similar crimes that might suggest a pattern. No witnesses or suspects who might have reason to frame me. Frustrated and exhausted, I drove to Rebecca's neighborhood. I wasn't sure what I hoped to accomplish. The crime scene had been thoroughly processed, and we'd already canvassed the area multiple times. But I needed to see it again with fresh eyes, now that I knew about the DNA match. Riverside Park looked different in the afternoon light than it had during our initial investigation. Children were playing on the swings while their parents watched from nearby benches. It was hard to believe that just 5 days ago, this peaceful place had been the scene of such violence. I walked the perimeter of the crime scene area, now marked only by some lingering yellow tape that fluttered in the breeze. The old oak tree where Rebecca had been found stood majestically against the blue sky, its leaves just beginning to turn colors for fall. As I stood there, trying to imagine what had happened that morning, I noticed an elderly man sitting on a bench about 50 yards away. He was feeding pigeons from a small bag, and something about his posture suggested he was a regular visitor to the park. I approached him carefully, showing my badge and introducing myself as the detective investigating Rebecca's murder. "Terrible thing, that was," he said, shaking his head sadly. "I've been coming to this park every morning for 12 years, and nothing like that has ever happened here before." "Did you know the victim?" I asked. "Not personally, but I'd seen her around. She jogged through here most mornings, always with those white earbuds in. Friendly girl, she'd wave when she saw me feeding the birds." My heart skipped. "You were here that morning? The morning she was killed?" He nodded solemnly. "Got here around 6 a.m., same as always. Didn't see anything unusual at first. But then I heard shouting, angry voices coming from over by the oak tree. By the time I worked up the courage to go look, it was all over. This was new information. We hadn't found any witnesses who'd heard the actual confrontation. Could you tell if the voices were male or female? I pressed. The old man squinted, thinking. Well, that's the thing. I could swear one of them was a woman. High-pitched, you know? But I didn't want to say anything before because I wasn't completely sure, and I didn't want to send you folks down the wrong path. A woman. My blood ran cold. The DNA evidence, combined with witness testimony about female voices at the scene, it was all pointing toward me in ways that made me feel like I was losing my grip on reality. I thanked the man and walked back to my car on unsteady legs. Sitting in the driver's seat, I tried to think rationally about what I'd learned. Even if there had been a woman at the scene, that didn't mean it was me. There were thousands of women in Portland who could have been involved. But the DNA match was still unexplainable. That evening, I made a decision that went against every instinct I'd developed as a detective. I decided to break into the forensics lab and run additional tests on the blood evidence myself. It was dangerous, potentially career-ending, and probably illegal. But I had to know the truth. I waited until well after midnight before using my access card to enter the building. The security guard, a sleepy-eyed man named Harold whom I'd known for years, barely looked up as I signed in. Working late again, Detective Chen, he mumbled. You know how it is, Harold. Cases don't solve themselves, I replied, trying to sound casual despite the fact that my heart was racing. The forensics lab was eerily quiet in the middle of the night. I made my way to the evidence locker and retrieved the samples from Rebecca Martinez's case. My hands were shaking as I prepared new slides and loaded them into the DNA analyzer. As I waited for the results, I paced the small lab like a caged animal. What if the test came back positive again? What if I really was losing my mind? What if I had somehow committed murder and blocked it out completely? The machine beeped softly, indicating the analysis was complete. I approached the computer screen with the same dread I'd felt the night before. But this time, something was different. The DNA profile that appeared on the screen wasn't quite the same as the one from the original analysis. There were subtle variations, markers that hadn't shown up in the first test. It was still a familial match to my DNA, but not an exact match. I ran the test 3 more times, using different samples and different equipment. Each time, the results were consistent. This blood belonged to someone related to me, but not to me directly. Sister. The word popped into my head with such force that I actually spoke it aloud in the empty lab. But I didn't have a sister. I was an only child, adopted at age 3 after my biological parents died. The adoption records had been sealed, but my adoptive parents had told me everything they knew about my background. Unless they hadn't known everything. I spent the rest of the night researching adoption records and DNA databases, trying to find any information about potential siblings. Oregon had strict laws about sealed adoption records, but there were ways to petition for information in certain circumstances. By dawn, I had a plan. It would require calling in favors and possibly stretching some legal boundaries, but I had to know if I had a biological sister who might somehow be connected to Rebecca Martinez's murder. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings with social workers and court officials. Mike kept asking if I was feeling better, and I kept lying to him, saying I was still fighting off a virus. Maybe you should see a doctor, he suggested after I'd been distracted during our briefing on another case. You've been off your game lately. If only he knew how off my game I really was. Finally, on Friday afternoon, I received a call from Sarah Morrison, the social worker who'd been helping me navigate the adoption record system. I've got some interesting information for you, Detective Chen, she said. According to the records I was able to access, you weren't the only child placed for adoption after your biological parents' accident. There was another girl, about 18 months younger than you. She was placed with a different family. My hand started shaking. Do you have any information about where she ended up? Some. Her name was changed to Emma Rodriguez when she was adopted. The family moved to California when she was 8, but after that, the trail gets murky. There are some records suggesting she had a difficult adolescence, several different foster placements after her adoptive parents died in a house fire. Rodriguez. The name hit me like a physical blow. My partner's last name was Rodriguez. Sarah, are you still there? The social worker was asking. Yes, sorry. Can you tell me anything else about Emma Rodriguez? Any recent addresses, employment records, anything? I can try to find more, but it might take a few days. These kinds of searches can be complicated when someone has been in and out of the system. I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. Was it possible that my partner Mike was somehow related to my biological sister? Rodriguez was a common name, so it could be a coincidence. But in detective work, I'd learned not to believe in coincidences. I decided I needed to confront Mike directly. If he had any connection to my sister, he might know something about Rebecca Martinez's murder. The thought that my own partner might be involved made me sick, but I had to follow the evidence wherever it led. That afternoon, I asked Mike to meet me for coffee at a small cafe near the precinct. He seemed pleased. We hadn't spent much time together outside of work lately, and I could tell he was concerned about my recent behavior. "You're looking better," he said as we sat down with our drinks. "Whatever bug you had seems to be clearing up." "Mike, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me," I began, my heart pounding. "Do you have any sisters?" He looked surprised by the question. "Where's this coming from, Sarah? Please, just answer me." He set down his coffee cup and looked at me seriously. "I had a sister. Emma. But she died about 6 months ago. Drug overdose in Sacramento." "Why are you asking?" The room seemed to spin around me. Emma Rodriguez, my biological sister, was dead. But if she was dead, how could her DNA have been found at the crime scene? "Mike, I need to tell you something that's going to sound crazy," I said, and then proceeded to explain everything: the DNA match, my adoption, the connection between Emma and me. As I talked, I watched Mike's face change from confusion to understanding to something that looked like fear. "Jesus, Sarah," he whispered when I finished. "You're telling me that the victim's blood wasn't from you, but from your dead sister?" "That's what the evidence suggests. But I don't understand how that's possible." Mike was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup. When he finally looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "There's something I need to tell you, too," he said. "Something I should have told you 6 months ago." My blood went cold. "What?" "Emma didn't die of an overdose, Sarah. She was murdered. And I've been investigating her death on my own time ever since." The cafe around us seemed to fade away as Mike explained that Emma had contacted him the previous year, saying she was looking for information about her biological family. She'd somehow traced her adoption records and discovered that her sister was a detective in Portland. She was scared, Sarah. She'd gotten mixed up with some bad people in California, dealers, mostly. She owed money to the wrong person, and she was afraid for her life. She wanted to find you, but she didn't want to put you in danger. "So you helped her instead," I said, pieces of the puzzle beginning to click into place. "I tried to. I gave her some money, helped her get clean, even let her stay in my spare room for a few weeks. She was a good person who'd made some bad choices. She reminded me of you, actually, same stubborn streak, same determination to do the right thing. But someone found her anyway." Mike nodded grimly. "Vincent Carrera. He's a mid-level dealer with connections to some serious players in the drug trade. Emma testified against one of his associates in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Carrera put a price on her head. I felt like I was in free fall." "And you think he killed Rebecca Martinez?" "But why?" Emma had been using the name Rebecca Martinez as an alias for the past year. False ID, fake social security number, the works. She was trying to disappear completely. The truth hit me like a freight train. The woman we'd found in Riverside Park wasn't Rebecca Martinez, the teacher. It was Emma Rodriguez, Emma Chen, my biological sister. The real Rebecca Martinez is probably alive and well somewhere, Mike continued. Your sister had been living under her identity, working at jobs that paid under the table, trying to stay off Carrera's radar. But how did you know all this and not tell me? I demanded, anger and hurt warring in my chest. Because I was protecting you, Mike said. Emma made me promise not to involve you unless absolutely necessary. She didn't want her problems to become yours. And after she was killed, I was trying to gather enough evidence to take down Carrera before bringing you into it. So you let me investigate my own sister's murder without knowing who she really was. Mike reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry, Sarah. I know how this looks, but I was trying to do what Emma wanted. She loved you, even though she'd never met you. She had a picture of you that she'd gotten somehow, probably from online police department records. She used to look at it and talk about what it would be like to have a real family. Tears were streaming down my face now. I'd spent my entire adult life wondering about my biological family, never knowing that my sister had been out there somewhere, struggling to survive and looking for me. We need to find Vincent Carrera, I said, wiping my eyes and trying to focus on what we could do now. If he killed Emma thinking she was Rebecca Martinez, he might try to eliminate any loose ends. Already on it, Mike replied. I've been building a case against him for months. I have enough evidence to bring him in, but I wanted to be sure we could make it stick. The next 72 hours were the most intense of my career. Working with Mike and a joint task force, we located Vincent Carrera at a warehouse in industrial southeast Portland. He was preparing to leave town with a trunk full of cash and drugs, clearly spooked by something. When we arrested him, he initially denied any involvement in Emma's murder. But when confronted with DNA evidence and witness testimony, he eventually confessed. He'd tracked Emma down through her use of the Rebecca Martinez identity, followed her to Portland, and confronted her in Riverside Park that October morning. She tried to run, he told us during interrogation. But I caught up with her by that big tree. Told her she owed me $50,000 for the trouble she'd caused. She said she didn't have it, never would have it. So I did what I had to do. The case closed with Carrera's conviction for first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice was served, but it felt hollow. Emma was still gone, and I'd never gotten the chance to meet my sister. Mike and I worked through the complicated feelings surrounding the case with the help of departmental counselors and our own friendship. He'd made mistakes in judgment, but his heart had been in the right place. Emma had asked him to protect me, and in his own way, he had. The hardest part was learning about Emma's life through her few personal possessions. She'd kept a journal that Mike turned over to me after the case was closed. Reading her words was like finding pieces of myself that I hadn't known were missing. In one entry, dated just 2 weeks before her death, she'd written, "I dream about meeting Sarah someday. Mike says she's one of the good ones, a real detective who cares about justice. I wonder if we look alike. I wonder if she would have liked having a little sister." The answer, I realized as I read those words, was yes. I would have loved having a sister. And even though we'd never met, Emma had been looking out for me in her own way. By using the Rebecca Martinez identity, she'd kept me from being directly connected to the dangerous world she was trying to escape. 6 months after Vincent Carrera's conviction, I visited Emma's grave in the small cemetery where Mike had arranged for her burial. I brought flowers, white roses, because they seemed peaceful and pure, and I told her about my life. About our adoptive parents who'd raised me with love and kindness. About the career I'd built helping people find justice. About the family I'd always dreamed of having. I wish we'd had time, I said to the simple headstone that bore her real name, Emma Chen. I wish I'd known you were out there. Standing there in the afternoon sunlight, I felt something I'd been missing my entire life fall into place. I wasn't alone in the world. I'd had a sister who'd thought about me, who'd tried to protect me even from a distance, who'd died hoping that someday we'd meet. The DNA match that had initially terrified me had led me to a truth I never would have discovered otherwise. In trying to solve what I thought was the mystery of my own guilt, I'd uncovered the story of Emma's courage and love. As I walked back to my car, I made a decision. I was going to start a foundation in Emma's name, focused on helping young women escape dangerous situations and rebuild their lives. It wouldn't bring her back, but it would honor the person she'd tried to become despite all the obstacles in her path. The case of Rebecca Martinez, Emma Chen, taught me that family isn't just about blood or shared experiences. It's about the connections we make and the love we carry for people we may never meet. Emma had been my sister for 28 years without me knowing it, and she'd influenced my life in ways I was only beginning to understand. Sometimes the most important mysteries we solve are the ones that help us understand who we really are. I still think about that moment in the forensics lab when I first saw my DNA profile on the screen. The terror I felt, the certainty that my world was ending. But that moment led me to Emma, led me to truth, led me to a deeper understanding of family and justice and love. If you've ever felt like a piece of your puzzle was missing, like there was a story you needed to understand to make sense of your life, I hope you'll keep looking. Sometimes the answers we find are different from what we expected, but they're exactly what we needed all along. The truth has a way of finding us, even when we're not sure we're ready for it.